Forgiveness in Rwanda. When I visited Rwanda in Africa, I was expecting the worst. After all, like everyone else, I had seen such horrible things on television and in magazines. I had read about terrible things that happened between the Hutus and the Tutsis. Hatred among friends, neighbors, and families. And my job was to go to Rwanda to help heal the hearts of the people. I wasn't ready for what I found. 1994 had been a terrible year, maybe the worst year in the history of that small nation, Rwanda. Over 700,000 people had been murdered. Oh, such a terrible thing between neighbors, between Hutus and Tutsis, men, women, and children. So many killed. So much blood was shed in that land. There was so much hatred and violence. But then a man named Antoine told me a story about a woman named Rosalie. Rosalie came to a meeting in crutches. Her face and whole body was wrapped in white bandages. Her neck was held in place by a special plaster collar. Everyone who looked at Rosalie felt sorry for her because it was clear that she had been chopped by a machete knife. In fact, it was learned that Rosalie's whole family had been murdered, and then they had cut Rosalie in her temples, her head, her neck, all over her whole body, and she had been thrown on the roadside to die. This is what Rosalie said. I know all the people who did this to me. They were our neighbors. I spoke to them and they finally gave me time to pray for them before they started cutting me. And I prayed for them and prayed for them to forgive them until finally I lost consciousness. And then for 3 days, Rosalie had bled and suffered pain from the cuts, thirst, and cold under the heavy rains as she lay along the roadside. Oh, can you imagine the pain that young girl suffered? And everyone expected her to be so angry and bitter and ready to kill those who killed her family and left her crippled for her whole life. But instead, this is what Rosalie said. I forgave these people. I forgave them even before they did it. And I still, in my heart, feel forgiveness for every one of those people. Well, someone asked Rosalie, what would you do if you met the killers today? After all, the government was now prosecuting the criminals who committed all the murders. What would you do? And she said, if I were to meet them today, I would not hand them over to justice, for I have forgiven them, and I wish them well. I pray for God to save their souls. What amazed me was that in the middle of such horrible things, in the middle of anger and hatred and murder and prejudice and bloodshed, here was a woman who loved. Like a ray of light, like a light in the darkness, like a beautiful flower blooming in the desert, like a smile in a sea of unhappy faces. That was the great love that shined through young Rosalie and could be seen in her eyes and in her heart of forgiveness and love. I expected Rwanda to be a nation of horrors and a nation of hatred, but instead I found it to be filled with people like Rosalie. In all the war, in all the killing, there were people like Rosalie. For Rwanda had become a nation of extreme love, of forgiveness, of bravery, big, big love, which overcame all the hatred in the world.